fantasy, caught in a landslide, no escape from reality.
Okay, so here's the deal. I read this and I don't really know what's going on. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be. I read this comic. I went into it, not expecting very much, just kind of, it's just going to be another event. And in the back of my mind, though, I was hoping a little bit that this would be the start of Jean Grey coming back. Maybe they're going to fix things. Whew, man, I had to get a sip of water there. My mouth is so dry talking about all this stuff. But so let's get into this. The cover is not really anything special. You got the Phoenix in the Phoenix costume, and you've got everybody in the background just like, oh, I'm so surprised. So, I mean, it's not bad. It's just not necessarily, getting my attention. So we start out here, and it's in New York because everything's in New York. And the art is so-so. I mean, it's okay. It's not really that bad. So they're basically, there's two kids just, cycling down the street. And then all of a sudden they see a lady in the street and she's wounded. And they go to see what's wrong. And then she jumps up and pulls this whole Village of the Damned routine. And then another girl pops up that looks like Jean and pulls the same thing. And then she starts floating in the air and everybody's freaking out. So then we cut to 2 hours later and it's the X-Men have arrived in their jet and they just park it in the street. And what kind of gets on my nerves is they play Logan out to be like this real low-T guy because he's an old dude. Can we not get like Wolverine back already? I mean, we have Old Man Logan that's in everything and he's basically just this old fart that's always pissed off. I mean, can we just get somebody else? But anyway, so they arrive and they're talking here. He says, one of the characters says, I'm just a little weirded out because I used to have family here. And so they're kind of talking, and then the police are there, and this right here kind of gets on my nerves a little bit, but I'll talk about it in a second. It says, they said, what brings you out here? And it says, probably the same thing as you. And he says, we got it under control. And she said, well, I appreciate that, officer, but here's the thing. We have this machine called Cerebro, and it's basically told us that there's a mutant phenomenon here. And he says, we don't get a lot of mutant stuff around here. She says, no offense, ma'am. He says, none taken. I mean, he's just saying, hey, we don't have a lot of that happen here. So then Rachel's kind of having an episode. She's basically doing the same thing that the people were earlier. So Nightcrawler's going to take her back to the plane. But they said, hey, you can do what you need to. And they said, well, we need to talk to the kids. And it says, you can talk to them right now. And it says they aren't at the hospital. And says, no, we didn't really know what to do with this kind of weirdness. And she says, weirdness? And he says, well, just come look for yourself. And so they look over there, and basically these kids are just floating in the air, catatonic, with their heads bloody. So it's a little strange. And here's where it gets on my nerves. Because Logan, out of nowhere, says, well, he may be a true moron, but Barney Fife over here is right. This does qualify as weirdness. What a jerk. You just arrived on the scene. They were very courteous to you. They never called you names and never did anything. And you're just going to say, well, he's a true moron, Barney Fife. I mean, what a jerk. And then they just cut to the next scene like, the police didn't say anything. They just cut to the title page after that. I was like, what in the world? But anyway, that just kind of bothered me a little bit. But so the writer is Matthew Rosenberg because for some reason they have gotten Matthew Rosenberg on Marvel. And they just said basically, he's going to be our new Colin Bunn. He's going to be our new Brian Michael Bendis. Excuse me. We're just going to put him on everything that we need to be done, and he can just pump it out real quick. Basically, that's what they're doing. So then we get into this, and they're having discussion with the rest of the mutants, and they're basically describing the situation, but they do a terrible description of this because they don't actually know what's going on. They just know that there's 3 points that are having a phenomenon right now, and we need to go investigate it. So here's the team, and it takes them 3-4 pages to describe what's going on and that they don't actually know what's going on. Oh gosh. So then they break up the 3 teams, and one goes to the Hellfire Club, one goes to Mount St. Francis, and one goes to the North Pole. And so they pretty much have the X-Force go to the North Pole, and then they have a random team of mutants that are basically the Uncanny X-Men go to St. Francis, and then they have the rest of the team with Cat go to the Hellfire Club. So I was trying to look here and see if they had split up a psychic between each of them. I guess you could count Magic as a psychic, since she has slight magic abilities and things like that. And then you've got they don't really have a psychic on the St. Francis team, which kind of worried me a little bit. And then you've got Psylocke with the North Pole team. You know, I would make sure to have a psychic on every team if that's what we're dealing with. So as the first team goes in with Cat, they're investigating the Hellfire Club. Nobody's there. It's been abandoned. And as they're looking around, they can feel a presence, so they get ready, they get defensive. And then all of a sudden, bam, all of these fighters show up and they're surrounded. Here's the thing I didn't really like. They miss an opportunity with this final panel because they have everybody standing around, and then they have Nightcrawler here, and he's just sitting up in this thing. I really just think it would have been better if you would have took that last image right there and changed the angle to an upward view from the team standing there with the crew, with all the soldiers around them, and then had Nightcrawler up in the chandelier where you could see better of what's going on, and then have like an outward shot of all the people around. I think this was just a lazy attempt to not have to draw very much, so they just drawed like him, and then you know, there you go. So anyway, keep going in this, and what's going on here? Okay, so keep going in this, and then we cut to the other team, one of the other teams with Rogue, and it's very funny because they make Bobby out to be a joke in the group, and it kind of keeps on going with that failed book that they had, you know, where the humor just was stupid, because it's almost like it's a trope to make fun of that, because Bobby's in here saying, "How are you guys not tired from always walking up these stairs?" And you're like, because we trained for this. And he's like, yeah. He's just saying, you know, hey Warren, did I ever tell you that I think it's real weird when you walk upstairs? It's like watching a pigeon trying to cross the street, which I was like, wah wah. And then Gene's like, "Shut up, Bobby." And I mean, it's a little cringy because he's basically become the joke of the X-Men at this point with his failed book. So then this lizard guy, which really just looks like Groot, attacks them, and then we cut back to the X-Force, and they see somebody in the distance, but they can't smell him or sense him. So when they get closer, they realize that it's actually looks like old, you know, the regular Wolverine. So then we cut back to the team at the Hellfire Club, and they're fighting all these putty soldiers. And for some reason, Jubilee goes vampire on one of them and bites their neck off. I don't really know why. She's never really had that, you know, characteristic before. And then she finds out that they're artificial. So they're fighting a bunch of artificial soldiers. And then as Rogue is fighting the big ugly creature, she tells everybody else not to touch him because he can drain life force just like her. So they pretty much hit her opposite. So then we cut back to the X-Force and Psylocke's Bubble Butt as they're fighting the regular Wolverine, as they think, and so they shoot at him. It doesn't do anything, and then he starts going ham on them. And then we cut back to the Hellfire Club, and they're just fighting the putty. You know, there's nothing really going on, so they decide, instead of using Nightcrawler's teleporting ability to get out of there, they're going to use Colossus to just run through the wall, which is a cool thing to do. It's a cool effect on the story, but you know, whatever. So then we cut back to Rogue and her team, and they're fighting the lizard guy, and he gets a hold of I think he grabs Bobby. I can't really tell who it is. No, it's Hank. It's Hank. Okay, because they draw all the characters the same basically. And then Cyclops saves him, and then Rogue knocks him out of the way and basically says, "Kids, I told you not to touch him." And then they make a terrible joke. Then we cut back to the X-Force here, and they're fighting this Wolverine, and this Wolverine's just taking them to school. He's taking them to school. And so at that point, it comes down to just, of course, Old Man Logan and the regular Logan, which is, I don't know if he's regular Logan or not, and because he hasn't talked or said anything. But then we cut back to the Hellfire Club team, and all the Putty members are now gone. They just disappeared. And then we see Rogue's team, and the Lizard guys just disappeared. And then at that point, the regular Wolverine has just disappeared. So then they're all just stuck standing looking at the sky, and they see something glowing, and they're like, oh crap, that's not good at all. And then we see somewhere called Elsewhere. I don't really know where that's at. And then we see some women at a diner staring up, and it's the Phoenix symbol in the sky. She says, well, that looks like a big bird. And she goes, I can't, you know, I don't know. And obviously the other girls has a name tag named Jean, so that's obviously Jean Grey. And so there we have our first look at Jean Grey again. So don't really know what's going on, because she's obviously working at a diner, and this is kind of strange, you know, like what's happening here. So then we cut back to them going into the diner to tell people about it, and this lady's obviously not paying attention. She's like, what are y'all talking about? And it says, you know, it was like this big bird in the sky, you know. And she said, a big bird? And then she asked, you know, Jean about it, and Jean says, well, I don't really know what it is. Well, the look on this girl's face obviously shows me that something's up, you know, something's going on here. And so then she says, well, that settles it. Either the sun had a giant bird, or it's a cloud. It's like, what? That's a weird thing to say. And then she says, now can someone try to take Mr. Cassidy's order? And says, how are you today, Mr. Cassidy? And that's when it got my attention, because isn't that Logan's other son right there? That looks like it to me. You know, the redheaded or blonde-headed one that they talk about sometimes. But he says, I'm good, lass, just trying to make up me mind here. I'm just not sure what I'm in the mood for. So then, as she's walking home, we get a reference of a church with a sign that says, I looked, and behold an ashen horse, and he sat on it and had the name Death. You know, that was the old, you know, trope of here comes Death riding on a white horse. And so she goes home. She has a nice pretty house. She says hello to everybody. She goes to feed her bird. She has a, you know, bird that kind of has that trope of earlier when they had the birds that were, you know, they were controlling them, they were flying through the air. And they said, oh, you know, how was work? You know, how's, you know, it's, you know, something's up, because both the parents coming in there and just like, how was your day? You know, like it's the 1950s or something. And so she goes, yeah, it was just this really weird thing. I don't really understand, you know, what was going on. And she says, you know, I just been feeling a bit off today. And says, well, you can tell our guests that dinner is canceled. Guest? It says, you didn't forget, did you, dear? And then she opens the door, and there's Scott, and he says, hello, sweetheart, miss me? And we see a picture on the counter of her and Scott. So this is Scott Summers. So then it makes you wonder what's going on here, because this is, you know, is this the past? Is this some kind of, I think what it's probably going to be is it's going to be some kind of reality in her head. But we'll just have to wait and see. But this is really strange so far. I'm still kind of intrigued. I'm just kind of, you know, it's almost like the same business as usual, because you're using the same characters, you're kind of doing the same things. So I really want to see what's going to happen. But I am happy to see that the art is a little better, and the women are drawn like women, especially Kat. She looks more like a female than she did in some of the other series. And Storm is in her costume instead of dressed like Grandma. So that was good. Now the Old Man Logan thing kind of is played out. At this point, I really like to see him just go and have the regular Logan back. And that's sad, because I really like Old Man Logan. But just like everything that Marvel used to do, they take something that's good, that's quality, and they put it in everything. You know, they don't understand that you can have one good thing, and it doesn't have to be the trope of the entire company. Just like they did with Deadpool, just like they did with all the other things. They play it out. Like they just bleed it dry. And they change what made the original character good. So that was kind of sad. But other than that, this book's pretty good. I mean, I would definitely give it a read, and I would definitely keep on reading. Now, it does seem like they're a little confused about where they want to go with it. But I do have a lot of there's a lot of good in it setting up things. So, you know, we've got the story of what's happening at these 3 points. Why is there that Logan that just appeared? And I'm going to go ahead and put out my hypothesis that it's probably going to be the Phoenix powers manifesting, doing these different things. But we'll just have to wait and see. You know, it's too early to tell, but so far so good. So we'll see what happens. There's just a couple of points here and there that kind of made me go, eh. But other than that, you know, I can forgive some stuff if the main story is pretty good. So we're going to see what happens. I'm really, you know, I really want to have Professor X back, though. I'm tired of Kitty Pryde being in charge of the X-Men. Just makes zero sense considering all the other people that could be the leader. Basically, you're just giving her the job because she has no other point to the team. But alright, I'll talk to you guys later. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Hope you liked this video, and Underground Geek out.
I wish I knew you when I was young.